Well, thank you guys for agreeing to be interviewed today. We appreciate you coming out. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Jay Kempton. I'm the president and CEO of the Kempton Group. We're an independent third-party benefits administrator here in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
I'm Keith Smith. I'm co-founder, Surgery Center of Oklahoma, co-founder with Jay, Free Market Medical Association, and happy to be here.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about Surgery Center of Oklahoma.
Surgery Center of Oklahoma is a price transparent, free market minded facility. We put all of the prices on a website about 10 years ago that we had been quoting over the phone since we opened in 1997, and that was a move I think that helped people in this part of the country, but I think it's helped people in other parts of the country too that have either copied our model because it was the right thing to do, or because they lost business to us. But it's also been good for patients that have used our pricing to leverage a better deal wherever they are. The latest thing I think at the Surgery Center of Oklahoma that's noteworthy are the large number of people from far from Oklahoma who are traveling here for their care. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen patients from Cameroon, Cuba, Pakistan, and Brazil, and Canada, and it's just these ideas are powerful, and it's really a tribute to the power of these ideas. And once they get out there, it's a movement I think that can't be stopped.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the free market can't be stopped, and anytime we try to stop it, it ends up prevailing eventually. Even in those countries that you talk about that are seeking healthcare here, Cuba, for instance, they find a way to access the free market. So, you speak of, I just think what you've done, Dr. Smith, is you have really shaken the market up in a great way. And, thank you for the tour of your facility this morning, and I really appreciate it. A wonderful facility, great idea. I noticed this as I was driving out. There's, you were talking about a partnership you kind of have with an ER in town, and I noticed a sign, a big billboard sign for them, and I just realized that that is probably something that probably wouldn't have happened, I'm guessing, if it wasn't for you. I mean, I'm sure that was after you guys, right? That was after the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, correct?
I don't think that's a terrible overstatement, but the individuals that put that facility together are some of the most courageous in this movement that I've met, and no statement should be made that detracts from the incredible courage it took to do what they've done.
Absolutely.
They have told me that some of the uncertainty that they had as entrepreneurs was mitigated by knowing that we were successful taking a similar path. And I think ultimately that has been our contribution. And we work together. Jay works with them. Jay needs to talk more about this, but I think it's important for people to know, and I think a lot of physicians don't understand this, this movement is fueled by the buying power of self-funded employers. And I think the average person in the United States doesn't even know truly what a self-funded employer is, and how important they are to this movement, how incredibly disruptive they can be of the status quo, and how really completely removed they are from most of anything that the goons in DC can come up
Right.
with. So, that you asked, for us to talk about how we work together. Jay represents clients who buy from me, and if it weren't for his clients, we'd be out of business. So, you have to have a buyer and a seller.
Right. That's free market, right?
Supply and demand.
We're all about
Free
that.
market.
And Jay represents in an honest, transparent way his clients who are buyers, and they choose to buy from a whole host of facilities, mine being just one, but the OKER bunch is another. There's a long list, and far from here too.
Yeah. Well, one thing I like about the ER example is that I think one of the things that I always get, so being the owner of a pharmacy, we have a cash pharmacy. We have a health and wellness model now, but we work with a lot of cash type physicians and providers that I've always looked to us because we were kind of in the forefront of it before they were. We've helped some of them go along the way and get out of the insurance market, and which is very brave for them, just like you say. I mean, it is very courageous to do that. But so we still get questions all the time from them and from patients. Hey, I've got XYZ procedure to be done. Who's a good place to go to that's a good cash provider? And one of the things that really in that mix that makes it a little bit tough sometimes is, well, what about emergencies? So to see an ER that is, getting into this is just amazing, because I am going to guess, I'm not going to guess, I know it's a guess, but I'm going out on a limb to say this, but that is just the first of one in many, many, many states. I mean, that's going to happen over and over.
I mean, their location here in Oklahoma City is not their first.
Awesome.
They actually started in Texas and have several locations there, and then started the location in Oklahoma City. But I think they've already broken ground on a new facility in Tulsa.
They're open in Tulsa.
They're open. Okay. Well, I knew that they're getting ready to make that move. So, so it's already moved beyond one location quite a long time ago.
That's awesome.
Same model.
Yeah. So give us a little introduction about yourself, Jay, and what you do.
Yeah, here at the Kempton Group, we're one of a few. There's still a few of us relics out in the United States, but we're an independent third-party administrator. And so, as Dr. Smith was saying, that when you have an employer that is tired of playing the insurance game, and they're looking for a more efficient model of providing benefits or health insurance to their employees, they choose to self-insure. The tax code allows for that. But most businesses that choose to self-insure, they're busy making widgets or whatever they do, and they need a third party to administer and design their plan, to process their medical claims, to assist their employees with care navigation, et cetera. And that's what my company does. We're a service company. We're not an insurance company. We're kind of a medical, healthcare related clerical service, really. But we act as kind of like the back office of a little employer-owned insurance company, if you wanted to draw an analogy. So we're an independent, and we also have kind of a pretty pure view of our role and how we want to be seen and how we want to interact with our clients. We get paid solely by our clients, which is pretty unique. As you know, being in the pharmacy world, getting paid by your customer is just part of the shell game that can, people in healthcare can have 100 different revenue streams if
right.
if you're kind of have loose ethics. It's the same thing in my world. Third-party administrators, they can charge a percentage of savings, they can charge a percentage of spend. All of these things that essentially, if the employer incurs ever increasing healthcare costs, if you've kind of hitched your revenue wagon to ever increasing healthcare costs, it's a great way to get rich, but you become part of the problem. And so we chose not to do that. Since we get paid by our clients just for administrative services, the way that we get more clients and we have healthy clients is by teaching their employees and their dependents on how to find and purchase high-value healthcare from high-value medical providers, ones that have very high quality and have very low cost. And finding those types of medical providers in the status quo that is American healthcare is very difficult.
Right.
There are whole industries arrayed to make sure that you don't know where a good place to buy healthcare is. And so when I was introduced to Dr. Smith and Surgery Center of Oklahoma back in, I think, late 2011, by a client of ours that happened to be a neighbor of his, it it really kind of opened our eyes, and probably the reason that we're here and together on a podcast with you and are both co-founders of the Free Market Medical Association is because when we did meet, I represented what I would consider kind of pure demand for high value care. The employers, they just want happy and healthy employees, and they want to figure out how they get happy, healthy employees at the lowest price point possible. They're kind of the purest cash buyer out there, very much like an individual patient. And then Surgery Center of Oklahoma was a very willing seller that was looking for willing buyers. And so when you had supply and demand meet, we really kind of created a ripple in the pond, at least here in Oklahoma, that's started to spread all over the country.
Yeah, I've heard of some other TPAs popping up. I know of one coming up in Washington State, and one of the ways it came up was from a cash provider like Dr. Smith,
Yeah.
who is a direct primary care provider, actually primary care. So, and he, there's a need for it.
Absolutely.
So, is there any kind of law that passed, or what made you change? 2011, 2008, there's a lot of changes going on in healthcare. What made you make some changes then? Was there anything that really made you change then?
Well, if you think through the timeline there, 2010 was when the Affordable Care Act came into play. Being an independent, family-owned administration company, all the experts in my industry said, well, if you're not one of the big insurance carriers, you're dead already. The body's just not cold, and you're not even going to have a place in this industry. And it really wasn't that much fun because, again, I was trying to do the best I could for my employers and their employees' independence. And it was very, very difficult to navigate the healthcare system. You really had to rely on some of these discount schemes that are hatched by the insurance companies or these preferred provider organizations. And that was really kind of the only way to navigate care. And it was a really poor way of doing that. And so what changed really for me is I was seriously thinking about getting out of this disgusting business because I was just had it. When you can't affect change, positive change, you just don't want to be part of it anymore. And luckily, before I made the bad decision of getting out of the business, that's Dr. Smith and I met, and he was like just this little ray of hope. That first I kind of at least there's one crazy one in the bunch, right? And I never thought that it would grow beyond
Right.
Surgery Center of Oklahoma, and then but like you said, the market started to work again. A buyer met a seller, and next thing I knew, I had competitors that were trying to emulate what I was doing, and then Dr. Smith had competitors that. On the supply side that were looking to emulate what he was doing, and and so like they say, the rest is history. And we hope that we were part of kind of the free market kind of DIY health reform movement.
Yeah, well, I think you guys are. So tell me a little bit about how this works for our viewers and for myself. So an employer comes to your company to try to insure would you call it that? Try to insure their employees?
We're going to say self-insured, but yeah, they have an obligation if they're over 50 employees, which most of them are, to provide Obamacare compliant benefits, insurance coverage, but they don't want to pay a premium to an insurance company. They would rather take the funds that they were sending off to the big insurance company. They'd rather keep it right there at their employer, right there, and hold on to those funds. And as their employees incur health claims, have medical bills, etc., they're paying me to process those bills, making sure that they're accurate, making sure that we're able to get the best deal we can. But we actually are paying these medical bills out of this pot of money that the employer has, instead of sending to the insurance company, has just kept right there at the employer. And so they're paying as they go. So there is no profit motive of an insurer or anything else. They only pay for for the medical costs that they incur. So if they can have happy, healthy employees at a lower price point, it drops right to the bottom line of the employer. And
Right.
so that's where I get back to it's, having happy, healthy employees that show up every day and want to go to work and aren't worried about their sick kid. Those are pretty good. Those are pretty pure motives. And again, an employer most people don't really think of it this way, but most employers, at least that we do business with, that are kind of small, middle-sized companies, they have a very pure motive, very much like an individual patient would. They want to be taken care of, but they don't want to get taken advantage of financially.
So there's no insurance company involved whatsoever. Is that what you're telling me?
We do have what's known as reinsurance or stop-loss insurance. That is at usually at a much higher level of coverage. That if you had an employer with 200 employees and they had a premature baby that was $1 million worth of medical expense, that could put a pretty good dent in that size of a company. So most of those employers will buy what's known as a reinsurance policy that it might have a deductible of $75,000 per individual, which if we're managing their health plan, again, trying to make them aware of free market minded, good guy medical providers like Surgery Center of Oklahoma, they may go for years and never ever hit that reinsurance level.
Yeah.
And reinsurance is a fraction of the cost of traditional health insurance because of the deductibles. So
Absolutely. Well, and so this reinsurance, is it through a typical health insurance company? The
No,
reinsurance is
they're actually through a reinsurance carrier. They're not regulated as health insurance because they really aren't. You'll never have a reinsurance company write a check to a hospital or to a doctor. It's really business insurance, and so it protects the employer from these catastrophic losses on their health plans.
So the health insurers are still out of the picture.
They are out of the
Perfect.
picture.
I love it because I think that's part of the problem with the health insurers have got in bed with the physicians and the pharmacies and the hospitals, and that payment system is really messed up.
Well, it's
The
not
health
exactly as rosy as you may say that self-insurance is the end-all to be-all, because the insurance companies have gotten into the self-insurance business. So we have a lot of competitors where an employer may be self-insured, like what we've been discussing, but their administrative company that they've hired to run their plan might be one of the big insurance companies.
I see.
That is acting as a third-party administrator. Now, and that's something that Dr. Smith and I learned quickly from one another, because when I told him, well, I'm a TPA and I provide administrative services, that was not good news to him. Because for him, TPA was a four-letter word because he was used to self-insured employers that had, Big Blue as their third-party administrator. And that looked just like any other insurance contract.
Yeah.
Even though the money was coming from the employer as opposed to the insurance company to a medical provider, the kind of the Gestapo tactics that are put in place when those negotiations happen and the games play, they're the same.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for clearing that up because, being in the healthcare industry myself and used to, years ago when we took payments for those insurance companies, I kind of didn't understand the difference between what you were doing and what they were doing. So I appreciate you clearing that up because that is a major difference. And ultimately, the employer is still empowered, it sounds like, and they're also empowered to make sure that their employees are healthy. And I don't think in another model that's really the case necessarily.
It's not, because the employer really doesn't have a lot of they don't have a lot of discretion to. I mean, Dr. Smith spends way too much time trying to have one of the insurance companies that's administering a self-funded employer's plan just to get them out of the way so that Surgery Center of Oklahoma can do business with the employer. And those two parties want to do business together. But, you've got this middleman that's in place that has their own agenda.
Right. So tell me what you think the future is of your ideas.
Yeah, I mean, these concepts expand every day. We're doing very well as a company. These ideas are resonating with employers. And I also think we're doing something right because I seem to have more and more competitors that are trying to emulate what we do, which is kind of our definition of success.
Right.
And the other nice thing about it is kind of the bad guys of healthcare, the folks that distort the market. It's some of the principles that we're educating and trying to put forth, via the Free Market Medical Association. Many of these emulators, if you will, they're also, they're staying within some of those free market principles, and it's starting to make life more and more uncomfortable for the healthcare cartel out there, which that's like just icing on the cake.
Yeah, yeah. I love that too. And, so my story about how I got introduced to Dr. Smith was I heard about his surgery center on Fox News years ago when he was interviewed by John Stossel, or not. I don't know if he's were you interviewed by John Stossel? Yeah, you were. And he was just talking about free market principles. Stossel is big on that. And at the time, our pharmacy was not billing any insurance, and we were just accepting cash from patients, or that or form of. And when we first did that, in 2002, we had colleagues that told us we're crazy, we're not going to be in business a year later, and there's no way you can do this, and blah blah blah. And so I really found that intriguing. And then I started writing a book about 5 years ago, just because being in healthcare almost 25 years, and just hearing all these stories about how to navigate the system, and the rip-offs of the overcharges and all this bad service and stuff. I just want to get the stories out there, and really just educate and empower patients that they have options, right? Because a lot of times patients don't know that. So I started writing this book, and I hired somebody to help me, and I sent it, and it was a process in itself to find people, because at first they're just thinking, oh, this guy's crazy. This guy is nuts. You are crazy. This is a crazy idea. And so anyway, the gal that finally said yes, who I'm still working with her to this day, is just awesome. And I sent her a video of Dr. Smith's interview with John Stossel. And she just reached out to him and said, hey, you want to talk to Shawn? And I was just ecstatic that he talked to me. And we had a 45-minute phone conversation last April, I believe. And some of the things he mentioned, it's like, oh yeah, I'm not the only one that thinks like this, right? And we got off the phone, and Crystal goes, Shawn, you're not the only crazy one out there. And I think, and really that whole process, there's a lot of us out there. And the louder we get, the more people come out, because they're not as afraid to stand up. There's a lot of people, including a lot of doctors, that are such a slave to the system. They know it's wrong. They know what they're doing is wrong, and they don't feel good about it, but they are so deep in it, they're scared to stand up. And I think the more of us that
They don't know how to get out of it.
It's tough, yeah. And so, anyway, I think this creates an avenue, just us showing them, that it can be done is just a great thing, to get the word out there. So, yeah. So, what do you see as the future, Dr. Smith, and some changes to our system? What do you see as the future of the surgery center?
Yeah, we're definitely at Surgery Center of Oklahoma in a growth mode. The Free Market Medical Association is definitely in a growth mode. More and more interest from physicians, facilities, and employers. Washington, D.C. is definitely in a credibility crisis place, which we hope continues. Any sort of solution that is mentioned or promoted by the folks in DC should be met with as much skepticism as someone can muster. Everything they do either goes wrong because it's poorly planned, or it goes wrong because they're intentionally evil and conflicted, or some combination of those two things. The nice thing I think that has happened is that the current White House occupant has changed the conversation. So I'm not a fan of government mandates to make anyone do anything, they typically have unintended consequences. But to mandate that hospitals have to, and insurance companies have to reveal their contracted rates is pretty disruptive. Even if it doesn't happen, it's tied up in court. Even if that doesn't happen, it's changed the conversation. I used to be, I think, spotlighted as an outlier. You know, how can you do this? How can you show your prices? How can they be so low? And I really do think the conversation has changed. And I think a little bit of the credit has to go to the White House. Because the question now is, well, there are people showing their prices and it can be done. Why aren't you showing yours? So I think that in itself is reason for optimism. There are other reasons to be optimistic for 2020 and beyond. I think you can just push people so far. You can just bankrupt people so many times. You can just have, the Marty McCarys of the world, on all of the talk shows talking about hospitals that are suing patients for the balance they owe. You can just do that so much before there's a tipping point, there's a real serious pushback and a demand for change. The change I would be in favor of, and I think J2 is from the ground up. It's never imposed on people from the top down. And so any ideas Washington, D.C. has about a solution should be rejected. All the solutions should be a manifestation of the market at work. And the only way the market can work is if the government gets out of the way. So I think there are any number of solutions that could emerge. The solution in Mississippi or Washington might look a little different than the one in Oklahoma, although probably based on the same principles. But Jay and I have got our finger on this pulse, and we are watching this develop, and I'm here to tell you we are both extremely optimistic about 2020 and beyond. The saying I use, the horse is out of the barn and it's not going back in. I think that the ideas of honest, cheaper, and better are very difficult to argue with. And I think there's a critical mass of people that now know it's possible and it's the right thing to do.
So what can the government do?
I do.
Go ahead, Jay.
The one thing I was going to add to that, which I think is important for your viewers to really understand and listen to, is the current occupant of the White House is I will slightly disagree with you as far as I don't think that he's changed the conversation. He's simply starting to notice and then repeat the conversation that we've been having for years.
Agreed.
Right.
He sounded like a card-carrying member of the Free Market Network Association at the executive order where
on the price transparency.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, he did. I thought, is this guy a member?
Yeah.
And all of this
Agreed.
momentum and all of this, this looming transparency has been done with zero government intervention, zero mandates. So it's all, if this thing if it slows down in the coming years, I can assure you it will not be because of the failure of the market. It'll be because the government decided to get involved with it. And I think that's something that everybody needs to understand. All of the momentum that's been created so far, it started like, that little ripple in the pond in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, right? It's flyover country. And it is continuing to reverberate. And if the government will just allow it, consumers will demand transparency, and the people that choose to remain opaque with their pricing and their quality, they're going to lose business, and eventually they'll come around or they'll go out of business. And that's the natural order of things.
Absolutely.
I look forward to the day a legislator asks me, what laws can we repeal to help you?
Well,
I've not been asked that yet.
Right. I was going to ask you
and
that.
I probably never will.
Well, right.
But having said that,
Yep.
there's a fellow in Tennessee who has asked me to chime in on what repealing certificate of need laws in Tennessee would do for the marketplace there. So, but that's not what legislators, they like to make laws and they like to mandate things, and what they really need to do is repeal and just we'll let them know when they've repealed enough. Just go back to work and do that.
So, that's what I was going to ask you. You don't want the government to make any more laws, so you want to repeal laws. I think that makes sense. So, what are some solutions? What laws should we repeal?
Latest ones, and then just keep moving.
Okay, so like for instance, for our
Chronologically-
viewers, what are two big ones? I'm thinking of some right now.
Well, every law they pass pertaining to the healthcare industry has had unintended consequences that have far outstripped and damaged any sort of, original intent that anybody had. Obamacare is a complete disaster.
To repeal that.
Completely repeal that,
Yeah.
and they should repeal HIPAA, and they should repeal
There you
because
go.
HIPAA does not protect the information of the individual. HIPAA protects the government from individuals retaliating when the government steals all their information. So, they name these laws very carefully so that their actual intent is cloaked. They should repeal high tech. They should repeal any of the mandates that force people to have electronic medical records. Somebody was talking to me the other day about Medicare, and Medicare, those folks, they're really interested in not spending so much money, and I'm laughing. I mean, the prices I have on my website are half what Medicare pays a hospital across town that doesn't pay tax. They also still pay physician services by a physician employed by a hospital at a rate double the same services provided by a physician not employed by a hospital. So if Medicare is serious, there are lots of things they can do. It's just important, I think, for people not to take the government seriously when they say they're part of the solution. They are the problem, and they're even the problem behind the cronies that have formed, and they formed this cartel. I say, the cronies deserve all the tomatoes you can throw at them, but Uncle Sam's still driving the getaway car. The federal government has auctioned off all of the favors that have resulted in this system people hate. And so the idea of turning the whole thing over to them is just not logical in my mind.
No, I don't think there would be a fix. And I think one of the simpler fixes at first, like you speak of the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, is, states could, because it's so harder to fix at the federal level. I get it, and I want to, believe me. And I think eventually it'll implode on itself because we just can't afford it. But, states can opt out of Obamacare, and I think that would be an easy one, or an easier one if states opt out of it, and then they don't have to be mandated with all the things that follow Obamacare. So then they could start making up their own system. Although I'm not in favor of states providing healthcare either. But and I think ultimately, what it comes down to is, repeal the Medicare Act. I mean, honest to gosh truth. And most politicians are never, ever have the guts. But even Rand Paul and Ron Paul usually would not stand up and say, well, yeah, I know, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's a ripoff, it's bankrupting us, we need to get rid of it now.
Yeah, and I tell people Medicare doesn't need to be tweaked or reformed. Medicare needs a competitor. And then it will go away. And what will be there for people who are currently under Medicare will be better. It'll be cheaper, it'll be more efficient, anyhow.
Yeah, it's true. But and right now, because of the age of Medicare and the mandates of Medicare, there's not really a competitor. The government has a monopoly on that market, pretty much.
Yeah, and if you don't sign up for Medicare, they ding your Social Security.
It's a monopoly. It's a scam.
Now, I'll tell you a good way to create a bunch of liberty-loving, libertarian young people who, unfortunately, many of them are very attracted to socialism. You can kind of hardly blame them because they're being forced to pay for socialist schemes like Medicare and Social Security out of a paycheck. I thought the other day, why don't we just give all the young people an opt-out? Just say, you are now tax exempt, just like these hospitals that are going to sue you if you don't pay your bill. You don't have to pay Medicare or Social Security taxes. And immediately you would have a bunch of libertarian young people in the United States. They would, and to ever go back and take that money away from them, I think that there would be a revolt. But it'd be easy to basically extend the same favor to to young people and anybody else, frankly, that wanted to take advantage of that, extend the same favor to them that the government has extended to the hospitals. Make them tax exempt. Make it so
Right.
both parties in the exchange of buying and selling healthcare have the same tax status.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So how about you, Jay? What do you got to add to this today?
Yeah, as far as the things that we run into from a regulatory standpoint that really impair our ability to help our clients and the patients, there were the Affordable Care Act could be repealed lock, stock, and barrel, and I wouldn't shed a tear. It would be a good thing. But within there are some things that are probably more egregious, at least for a self-insured employer. And really what most of them are, they have to do with plan design. Most viewers don't even know what I'm talking about there. But I mean, the Affordable Care Act imposed all sorts of things. Well, you have to cover this, and you have to cover this like this, and you can't not cover that. And most of it, as people would hear on the Today Show or whatever, it was all spun as these are positives. Well, we're in that business. We have a front row seat to it. And when, for instance, they said that a benefit plan could not have any annual limits. Well, we've been doing this for almost 50 years, over 50 years now. From when my father started this company, it was extremely rare when you would see $1 million claim. It happened, but it was pretty rare. Nowadays, it's a common occurrence. If you talk to a reinsurance company that is on the hook for those big dollars, it is a regular occurrence where they have multiple $1 million medical claims on single individuals. That is a direct result of the Affordable Care Act. Affordable Care Act, right? If you can't put a limit on it, it's kind of like a blank check. Yeah. And that's what you see. Another thing that we deal with, and the direct primary care physicians deal with on a regular basis, is the ability to use HSA funds to pay for a direct primary care membership. There's a lot of states that have looked at direct primary care. They choose to view it as insurance and then have it be regulated by insurance. Those are all stifling for kind of DIY reform. Another thing that we see is there are certain plan designs out there in conjunction with health savings accounts, which health savings accounts, most people say, oh, those are great. Those are consumer-driven insurance plans. Well, one of the issues with a health savings account is if somebody chooses to use Surgery Center of Oklahoma, he requires cash. So if you're an individual, he's got best pricing out there, but you've got to write him a check for the amount or finance it. But he expects 100% payment, not 80% after deductible or whatever. So for our self-funded employers within the plan design, if they use a high-value medical provider like Surgery Center of Oklahoma, the employer waives that deductible, that co-insurance. So the patients literally can get a service for free. Not if you're on a qualified high-deductible health plan that's used for a health savings account. Because the feds won't allow the employer to provide their employees free health care if they buy it from a medical provider that could end up saving the employer tons of money. So you scratch your head. And these are things that the regulators, sometimes you think, well, they're an evil genius. I think they just didn't. They just were ignorant of the unintended consequences.
My guess is they probably knew what they were doing, and they were lobbied by a big blue and said, oh, no,
I would generally believe that, except when that law was put into place, this type of healthcare really was so rare. Trust me, on another topic, I could certainly say it's intentionally, and I'd go right there with you, but I think this one is just an unintended consequence, and I think since those health savings accounts are tax advantaged, I just don't think that the feds want to loosen the grip on them. So,
yeah, and so what about TPAs and pre-existing medical conditions? Does that have anything to do when you're negotiating this plan or setting a plan up for somebody?
I think that would be, actually, I don't have a problem with, no pre-existing conditions. I think ultimately it's been a good thing. I think it's also, though, I think it's important to bear in mind that I think that was something that that's a solution that the market could have come up with. if left to its own devices. It was, we've seen all sorts of features and different benefit, positive things in the benefits business that have come about, not because of a government mandate, but because of consumer demand. Right. I think not having pre-existing condition limitations would have ultimately been one of those things. The fact that the feds just kind of laid down the law and said you're not going to have pre-existing conditions, I don't think is a bad thing. By now, it's kind of been mixed into the underwriting risk now. And that's one of the things that I think I would be reluctant to see go away because it can create some pretty severe hardships for individuals.
And ultimately, I've had a discussion with Dr. Smith before, and I do believe this in, just being in healthcare myself, is that ultimately pre-existing conditions, most chronic conditions don't have to be expensive to treat. I mean, what we've really done is because of the model we have, we created, we created a big business out of treating chronic conditions, when in reality they shouldn't really be that expensive to treat. Right. And if you use the right, if you navigate the system right, they're not expensive to treat. So
great.
Well, it looks like we're about running out of time. Anything you guys want to end with?
I would
mention the conference.
We'll talk about the conference, annual Free Market Medical Association, end of April in Dallas. That's worth checking out. Anybody that has some medical need and they actually have the sticker shock of a buyer, whether it's a self-funded employer, an individual, member of a cost-sharing ministry, somebody with a high deductible, somebody that has one of these Blue United Cigna Aetna plans that, they're wondering, can I buy the care that I need for less than this ridiculous deductible? They should go to the Free Market Medical Association website and check out Shop Health. There will be a lot of answers there. If the care that somebody needs is not listed there, there's contact information. I'm very accessible at the Surgery Center of Oklahoma's website. I answer emails really all day long from people that are looking for solutions because they actually do care what it costs. So the conference is just going to be sensational. Last year's was. I thought it was going to be hard to beat. Ron Paul was our keynote last year. Just
awesome.
to give you an idea of what the conference is like.
Awesome.
So it'll be a wonderful conference, and that website really, and Shop Health in particular, is worth perusing.
Awesome.
FMMA.org.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps up our interview. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
All right.